How many of you have looked at the ENERGY STAR NextGen program? Anybody? Okay. A couple, several. I am so excited about the ENERGY STAR NextGen program. EBA has been doing training across the country in partnership with utilities on ENERGY STAR NextGen. I know we've got one in Minnesota, one in Massachusetts coming up in December. We have another training for builders coming up in Colorado, and many, many more planned for the next year. Those of you that don't know, I also built, I think, the first 2 ENERGY STAR NextGen houses in the country. Gene Myers with Thrive built one, and I built one in Minneapolis for some friends. And it was really not that big of a leap from zero energy ready homes. So we'll kick things off here, but I'm really excited to introduce Dean Gamble with ENERGY STAR. Thanks for being here, Dean.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Aaron. All right, can you guys hear me okay? Thanks for hanging out with me after lunch. I am sort of blinded, so I can't even tell if you've left the room for other exhibits and expo. Even louder? Oh, okay. He wasn't kidding. Okay, held it very close. All right, so yes, I am the technical manager for the ENERGY STAR Single Family New Homes program. Very happy to be here in person presenting. I feel like it has been a very eventful year, and I'm happy to bring you the latest and greatest information on all things ENERGY STAR. I would say that we have become quite popular over the last couple of years. We're making a lot of new friends, and I feel like people are watching our every move. We are sort of like the Kardashians of building science now, it turns out. It's a very unusual position for me to be in. All right, let's see if I can advance. Let's see. Okay. Can we switch over to the slides on the screen as well? I see it's advancing up here. Unless it's a user error, which is possible. Hey, all right, perfect, thank you so much. Okay, so here's my agenda for today. I want to touch base on the new federal tax credit, new-ish federal tax credit for ENERGY STAR homes. I know that it's going to be, something that you've heard a lot about, but I think it's worth recapping the highlights. I'm going to touch base on National Version 3.2 of our program requirements, and what's next with ENERGY STAR, and then finally, an introduction to ENERGY STAR NextGen for those that are not familiar with it yet, making sure you leave with a basic understanding of what we require. We are also very excited about this new program in addition to Aaron. So let's start with touching base on the 45L tax credit. Again, most of you probably know something about this by now, but it's going to be around for the next decade, so it's worth hitting the biggest highlights of what we're talking about. Now, the federal tax credit under the new structure is tied to our federal programs for single-family new homes, for townhouses, and for duplexes. You're eligible for a $2,500 tax credit if you're certified to the ENERGY STAR Single Family New Homes program. If you're building a manufactured home, you are eligible for $2,500 if you're certified to the ENERGY STAR Manufactured New Homes program. And if you're building a multifamily building, then the dwelling units are eligible for a $500 tax credit if it's certified to the ENERGY STAR Multifamily New Construction program. Even better, you get double those amounts if you are certified to DOE's Zero Energy Ready Homes program, and there's also more money available if your multifamily units meet prevailing wage requirements. Now, the key thing here is that the homes have to be certified to the minimum eligible program version. So let's talk about what that means. For ENERGY STAR, the minimum eligible program version is tied to the acquisition date. That has been a point of confusion with some partners because it's different than what we require just for certification, which is the permit date. It's also different than what is required for DOE's Zero Energy Ready Homes program, so it's important to make that distinction. In addition, if you want to know more about what those minimum program versions are, then I recommend going to the tables available at this website. If you don't have this website bookmarked, this is one of your takeaways from the presentation, is to bookmark it now or get the slides and bookmark it later. This website contains all the tax credit information, including the tables of minimum eligible program versions for 2023 through 2026. We'll take a look at those in just a minute. And then I also want to note that the minimum eligible version for the tax credit, in some cases, is more stringent than the version that's required just to put the label on the house for certification. This has been a point of confusion, a recurring point of confusion for partners, and so I really wanted to call that out. So let's take a quick look at these tables. I'm going to focus on single-family new homes, start with 2024. So for this year, in almost every state in the country, the minimum eligible program version is National Version 3.1. There are 5 states where there is an alternative requirement. It's either a regional program requirement that you can use or must use, in addition to the option to use the national program requirements. Moving forward to 2025, almost every state in the country progresses to National Version 3.2. That's a big change, and that's why so many people are interested in National Version 3.2 among our partners. Only 2 states will remain with regional requirements, California and Hawaii. And then in 2026, almost all of the states say the same, National Version 3.2, but those 2 individual locations, California, Hawaii, advance to actually more stringent regional program requirements on that date. Tables for future years will be available, like the next year, 2027, will be available around January of next year. So progressively they'll come out and they'll tell you what you need to do for the tax credit. Now, those are the minimum eligible program versions for 45L. This is the other website you should bookmark if you haven't already, and I think most partners probably have, energystar.gov/newhomesrequirements. Here is where you can go to find the minimum version required just for certification, just to put the label on the house, foregoing the tax credit. We have it in both a nice map form, as you can see on the left, and in tabular format on the right. You can see on the left that almost every state in the country is only required to do National Version 3.1 right now. Only 9 states, in fact, have implementation date defined for National Version 3.2. So, builders find that the requirements for 45L are too stringent, say that they're just not ready to step up to National Version 3.2 right now. They may still be able to certify the homes to a lesser version because of our program requirements. And they should consider that because they have lots of benefits for certification even if you're not getting the tax credit, like a market advantage, meeting corporate sustainability goals, or in a lot of cases these days, local utility incentives for, say, National 3.1. So that's a really important thing to distinguish, and I want you to leave with that clear understanding about the difference between the 2. Okay, so time for a pop quiz. One, to see if there's anyone still in the room since I'm blinded. So question here, let's say that we have a home in Louisiana. It is permitted on January 1st of 2025. It's going to be acquired later that year in August of 2025. What's the minimum program version that has to be used for certification? And then what's the minimum program version that has to be used if you want the tax credit? Is it A, National Version 3.1 for certification and National Version 3.1 for the tax credit? Is it B, 3.1 for certification but 3.2 for the tax credit? Or is it C, version 3.2 for both certification and the tax credit? I have a little cheat sheet if you can read this, because I don't expect you to memorize all of our tables. On the left is the minimum version required for certification, and on the right is the table that we were just looking at for the tax credit for acquisitions in 2025. So who votes A? Okay. Who votes B? Excellent. And who votes C? Okay, I'm going to give everyone the benefit of the doubt that you guessed B. Looks like you got that right. Okay. So again, some partners have been getting confused and tripped up about this point, so that's why I wanted to kind of drive it home. Now, I mentioned that we're getting very popular these days, so I just wanted to give you a quick update on participation. Our numbers have been growing the last couple of years, even before the tax credit came into existence. But 2023, the first year that it went into effect under the new structure, we actually were close to certifying 200,000 homes in the ENERGY STAR program that year alone. That was a record-breaking year. This year, we're 3/4 in, we've already surpassed that number. So we may be on track to certify close to 300,000 homes this year. Quite a remarkable uptick. That, however, is a high watermark because, as I mentioned, the tax credit is advancing to national version 3.2 next year. So we expect those numbers to be decreasing, at least in the short term, going forward. Okay, any questions about the tax credit that I can refer you to your tax professional about before I move on? Just shout it out because I can't necessarily see you if you have a question. Okay, I'll take silence as a good thing. All right, let's move on to national version 3.2. This is fast becoming the hottest version around. I don't know what the most popular Kardashian is. I don't really follow that, so that would be national 3.2. Okay, so how familiar are you with 3.2? Couple of options here. A, it's a stranger to me. I'm just hearing about it for the first time. B, we're generally acquainted. I have a basic understanding. Or C, we're best buds, and I am running simulations already to see if homes comply. So A, B, okay, I saw some A's, that's great. B, and then C. And some of you are just being very shy. Okay, well, there are two key differences between national version 3.1 and 3.2. So if you're already generally familiar with the ENERGY STAR program, then this will be pretty straightforward, which is great. Those two differences are a more stringent ERI target, and then the second change is a more stringent thermal backstop. So let's talk about those in more detail. For ENERGY STAR, to help ensure that we're getting above code savings, we define what we call the ENERGY STAR ERI target for each home. I just want to briefly talk about how that is determined because it plays into kind of the underlying requirements. So when you go to model a home in rating software, it's in the background configuring what we call a target home, which is a home that's identical to what you just put in terms of architecture, so the same house size, number of stories, foundation type, site location, fuel type, all those things. And once that target home is configured, the rating software will apply what we call the ENERGY STAR reference design to that. The ENERGY STAR reference design is a set of prescriptive features that covers the house from top to bottom, all things efficiency. So we're talking insulation levels, infiltration rates, duct leakage, appliance efficiency, equipment efficiency, the whole thing, everything in the kitchen sink to determine the efficiency of that home. The rating software then calculates the ERI score of that home, the target home configured with those efficiency features, and that becomes the target that the builder then can mix and match to their heart's content until they meet or beat that target. So let's say you're modeling a home, you put it into software, you want to certify it, and it spits out for that particular house a target of 52. Then you have to mix and match upgrades until you meet or beat 52 using any features that you would like. So none of the ENERGY STAR reference design features are mandatory, but if you don't use them, then you're going to have to pick other features instead to offset that until you hit that target. So what are those targets? Well, that depends on the program version. So national version 3.1, which is being used in most parts of the country, the target is generally 55 to 65 for most homes. And then national 3.2 is being implemented in states that have adopted the 2021 IECC or an equally rigorous code. And as we were discussing just a couple slides ago, the tax credit is also going to require national 3.2 in most states beginning in 2025. So as more states adopt more rigorous codes, you'll see the expansion of national 3.2 just for certification. And then if you want the tax credit, you're fast going to become friends with national 3.2. That's right around the corner. And so for national 3.2, the range is about 45 to 55 for most homes. There are some different performance targets defined in California, Pacific, and the Caribbean. That's my caveat there. So what is going into that target of 45 to 55? Let's look at the envelope measures that go into that ENERGY STAR reference design for national 3.2. Those are shown on the screen. The cells that are highlighted in green are those that are an improvement over the 2021 IECC. So we start off with an enclosure that's aligned with the prescriptive path of the 2021 IECC with insulation that's properly installed. So properly installed installation. We are configuring the homes with the ENERGY STAR product spec for windows and doors that was in effect at the time that we were designing national 3.2. All of the locations, all climate zones have 3 ACH if 50 infiltration, and we have a basic ventilation system, supply or exhaust in each of those climate zones. Now let's look at the non-enclosure measures. So we're configuring the ENERGY STAR reference design with the ENERGY STAR product spec for furnaces in most locations, with heat pumps and air conditioners that were basically aligned with the ENERGY STAR product spec for that category, again, when we were developing National 3.2. We have ducts located in conditioned space, 100%. We have a programmable thermostat. We have 100% LED lighting, an ENERGY STAR refrigerator and dishwasher, and we have a high-efficiency water heater. So ENERGY STAR caliber, instant gas, or electric heat pump water heater. So again, that results in a target of about 45 to 55 for most homes. Again, you don't have to use any of those ENERGY STAR reference design features if you don't want to, but a note of caution is that there are a couple of features that I think you're very likely going to have to use in order to hit that target. That includes the 2021 IECC insulation levels or equivalent. It includes ducts in conditioned space, and it includes an instant gas water heater or a heat pump water heater. So, partners will ask us, does that mean that, how much flexibility do I really have to hit that target and not use efficiency features in the reference design? I want to run through a couple of examples for you. I'm going to start off in a hot climate, climate zone 2. This happens to be a slab-on-grade 2,400 square foot home with electric heating. And if you put that home into the software, you get a target of 50 for that particular house. And if you configure the rated home with the ENERGY STAR reference design features, lo and behold, you end up with a target, with an ERI score that's basically at that target of a score of 49. That makes sense. They're supposed to be sort of one and the same. So that would be a great way to start. But let's say that you're not really interested in using all of those features. What are some other options? I started by modifying the enclosure. So I dropped the insulation levels from R49 down to R38. You can see that I increased the infiltration from 3 to 4. I compensated for those downgrades with a better window, and that still got me to a 49. So that would work fine. Next up, I looked at high efficiency HVAC. And so in this case, I was upgrading I kept the enclosure that we were talking about. I upgraded to 18 SEER, and then I downgraded the water heater to an electric resistance water heater instead of a heat pump water heater. And I also took grade 3 for HVAC grading, so I wasn't even going to assess the HVAC installation. That still got me to a score of 48, so I had room to spare. Next, I looked at a different water heater. I upgraded to an ENERGY STAR caliber heat pump water heater, 3.3 UEF, and that allowed me to stick with the grade 3 HVAC, stick with 4 ACH 50 in that modified enclosure, and I still met the target. And finally, I looked at using HVAC grading. I assumed grade 1 HVAC in this particular case, and that allowed me to back off to that electric resistance water heater, stick with the modified enclosure, and go all the way up to 5 ACH 50, and I still hit the target. So let's move on to a mixed climate, climate zone 4. So now it's a 2-story home, 2,400 square feet. It is a conditioned basement with a gas furnace in Baltimore. Again, if you just start off with the ENERGY STAR reference design features, for this particular house, the target is a 52, and you come in at a 51 for the rated home. So first, I kind of modified the enclosure. Again, that's an area that most builders are interested in tweaking. And so I went from an R60 down to an R49 in the attic, and I went down to R21 high-density bat in the walls. And then to compensate for those downgrades, I improved the window U factor down to 0.25. That worked. So then I built off of that. I increased the infiltration to 3.5 ACH 50, so I had a little wiggle room. I took the grade 3 HVAC grading default, and I improved, in this case, the furnace to 95 AFUE, a current ENERGY STAR gas furnace. That worked as well with room to spare. Then I upgraded the water heater to ENERGY STAR caliber water heater instead with that modified enclosure. Still took the grade 3 default for HVAC grading, and I was able to have a little wiggle room on the infiltration. That worked. And finally, I looked at those HVAC grading again, so grade 1. That allowed me to downgrade to 14 SEER air conditioner and stick with that modified enclosure and still meet the target. And finally, let me just do a quick cold climate example. So 2,400 square foot home, 2-story conditioned basement gas furnace in St. Paul. Again, the reference design features, you end up with a score of 49 versus a target of 50, so that works. The adjusted shell was pretty similar to Baltimore, going down to R49 in the attic and the R21 in the walls, so no continuous insulation on the walls. You're compensating for that with 0.25 U-factor windows and also upgrading the foundation insulation to R21 in the walls. Building on that, I went with a 96 AFUE furnace, so just a tweak to the furnace relative to the reference design. That allowed me to back off to HVAC grading of default HVAC grading grade 3, and a little wiggle room on the infiltration. Then I looked at the high efficiency water heater at 0.95. That gave me the ability to stick with grade 3 as well as still have some wiggle room on the infiltration. And finally, I was looking at grade 1 HVAC, and that allowed me to stick with the higher infiltration and the modified enclosure. So the takeaway here, hopefully, if you haven't done this exercise yet, is that there is a little bit of flexibility to mix and match measures here. You're probably just not going to be deviating in a couple of key areas from the ENERGY STAR reference design, like you're probably not going to be moving the ducts to a vented attic unless you're really going to pull out all the stops to compensate for that. So that's the first key change. The second key change between National 3.1 and National 3.2 is a more stringent thermal backstop. So what do we mean by that? Well, the thermal backstop is the minimum amount of insulation and the minimum window performance that you have to include in the home for it to be certified. So you could have an ERI score of 0, highly efficient, but if you're not meeting the thermal backstop, then you can't certify the home. We've actually always had that in our program, but with National version 3.2, it is more stringent. And with the thermal backstop, that means that you are allowed to trade off insulation levels between the ceiling, the walls, and the foundation, as well as the windows and doors. But you can't compensate with, say, like an 18-SEER air conditioner. Okay, so we can quantify that thermal backstop. It's basically the weighted U factor, the area weighted U factor of the entire enclosure. And you'll often see that described as the building UA value. You're literally multiplying the U factor of a component by the area of that component. I know that's a little bit wonky, something that a lot of people don't have intuition on yet, completely understandable. So I just wanted to run you through a couple of quick examples to help build that intuition. So I happened to do these calculations on a 2,400 square foot home with a 15% window area to floor area ratio. Your results would vary a little bit if you did a different house type. So I want to start off with windows. So when we say UA, you're literally multiplying 0.35 U factor by 360 square feet of area, and you get the UA value of 126. And as you improve that window from 0.35 to 0.3 and 0.3 down to 0.25, your UA becomes lower, which is better. Now I just want you to pay attention to how much that UA is changing as you improve that window. It's going down by about 18, which is actually quite a bit because windows are unfortunately relatively poor insulators. So now let's move over to walls. You're doing the exact same calculation. The U factor of the wall times the area of the wall will give you the UA value. As you improve the insulation, the UA value goes down. I just want you to pay attention to how much that's changing. So improving your walls from R13 to R15 has about the same impact on the UA as improving your windows from 0.35 to 0.3. And I'll also point out that as you go from R19 to R21, the UA value improvement is about half of what you got from going from R13 to R15. So diminishing returns as the insulation level gets higher. And finally, let's look at ceilings, which are relatively highly insulated to begin with. You can see that the change in UA as you improve that insulation level is really quite small. So the key takeaway here of this slide, if that was too much in the weeds for you, that is fine. The takeaway here is if you want to improve the UA of your house, you'll get the biggest bang for your buck by starting with the windows and improving those, then the walls, and then the ceiling. Okay, so what are the thermal backstops for ENERGY STAR? Again, that depends on the version. For National version 3.1, that's in effect in most states in the country, it is 100% of the UA value of the 2009 IECC prescriptive path. And some partners didn't even know that existed because it was so easy to meet. With National version 3.2, it's more stringent. It's based on the UA value of the 2021 IECC prescriptive path for homes that are permitted before January 1st of 2025 and certified using National 3.2. It's 105% of that UA value. And then for homes that are permitted on or after January of 2025, it drops down to 100% of that UA value. Now, if you're not familiar with the requirements in the 2021 ICC prescriptive path, I put those on the screen here, along with the 2009 ICC for comparison. And I've shaded in green the differences. So I kind of would summarize those changes into 3 categories here. So climate zones 1 and 2, I would call modest. Sure, the ceiling insulation is higher. The windows are a little bit better than the 2009 ICC, but it's almost harder to buy windows that are worse than that these days, almost. So that's why I say that's a pretty modest change. The second category is climate zones 5 through 8. I would call that a moderate change. In fact, the 2021 ICC has basically the same insulation requirements in climate zones 5 through 8. It's all identical except for some differences in floor insulation values. So you're going up to R60, which is a big deal, but it's from a relatively high level to begin with. The windows are basically what most of our partners are probably using today anyways. The wall insulation is higher for sure, but it's also starting from a relatively high level of insulation to begin with. And then some modest improvements to the foundation. And the last category, climate zones 3 and 4, is what I call major. And I call it major because the wall insulation requires a change in assembly type. You're really getting to 2x6 construction there. And slab insulation is introduced for the first time in climate zone 3. So if that's kind of freaking you out, that's okay. We have the UA approach to give you some flexibility. So let me calm your nerves a little bit by talking about those trade-offs. So let me give you some examples here. I'm going to start off with that modest group. Climate zone 1, I'm not even going to show you an example because, again, 2021 ICC is, for all intents and purposes, the same as the 2009 ICC. For climate zone 2, the big change, again, is the ceiling insulation, and the windows have gotten a little bit better. So if you can just put those things in, then you're good to go. You put them in, you calculate the UA for the home, you're going to find that it meets the 2021 ICC UA. But let's say that you're not comfortable with that, you want some other options. So in this case, I downgraded from R49 all the way down to R30. That's a big change. And to compensate for that, I improved the windows and from 0.4 to 0.3, and I added insulated doors. And you see the UA value down there is not just meeting the 2021 ICC, it's exceeding it by 9%. It's 9% better. So you can see that on the left, it's 452.8. You end up with 412 on the right. It's lower, it's better. So you got room to spare there. So lots of flexibility. That's why I say I don't think most partners are going to have challenges meeting the backstop at climate zone 1 and 2. Okay, let's move on to the moderates category. I'm going to use climate zone 5 as an example, representative of 5 through 8. Changes almost across the board: ceiling insulation, wall insulation, window improvement, and foundation insulation improvement. So again, you could just go with that and you'd be good to go, right? That's going to meet the UA target by default. But let's say you want some other options. Let's say that you don't want to use continuous insulation on your walls. That's something we hear a lot from builders. So I'm going to just go with a high density bat in the wall cavity, R21, and skip the continuous wall insulation. And to compensate for that, I'm going to improve the window U factor modestly to 0.27. I'm going to use insulated doors, and I'm going to use that same high-density bat in the foundation. That also allows you to squeak by without any continuous insulation on the walls. Okay, well, let's say that R60 is a step too far. You want to drop back down to R49, but you're willing to max out the cavity insulation to R23. So no continuous insulation on the walls, but you're packing the 2x6 wall with insulation. You apply the same window and door upgrade, you get there as well. And then finally, let's say that you invest in a really good U-factor window. You go down to 0.25. What does that give you in terms of flexibility? You can stick with R49 in the ceiling, which is pretty conventional in the north these days. You can stick with R21 bats in the wall, and you can actually downgrade your foundation insulation, wall insulation to R13, and you still hit the target. So you can see how powerful that good window is doing in meeting this. Okay, let's move on to the most difficult category. Start with climate zone 3. I modeled a slab-on-grade home. Here's where you have an increase in the ceiling insulation, you have a change in the wall assembly, and you have a slab insulation. Again, if you do that, kudos to you, you're good to go. Let's say that you can stick with the R49, but you don't want to go to 2x6. So one alternative that we've seen in the Climate Zone 3 kind of taking off, like in Dallas, for example, is sticking with the 2x4 wall with a high-density bat, but adding a little bit of continuous insulation, R3. If you pair that with a modest improvement to your window U factor, 0.28, and your insulated doors, you can put in just a little bit of slab insulation and you can hit the target. So that would be one way to go. Let's say instead you're willing to go to 2x6 and you put in a high-density bat. You stick with R49 in the ceiling. You can have an even smaller improvement to the window, and you can get rid of the slab insulation altogether, and you'll also be good. Or let's look at the window example again. Let's say that you're willing to invest in 0.25 U factor windows. That allows you to go back to the 2x4 assembly with a little bit of continuous insulation and no slab insulation at all, and you can still hit the UA target. And finally, let's look at Climate Zone 4. Slabs and basements are common there. I went with a slab example because that tends to be a little bit harder to hit the UA target. So again, improvements to the ceiling insulation, the wall insulation, the windows, and a little bit of a tick up in the slab insulation. If you can do that, you're good to go. Let's say you're willing to stick with the R60, but you don't want to do continuous insulation. Well, if you max out that wall cavity at R23, and you make a modest improvement in your windows, then you're good to go. Next, if you want to stick with R49, if R60 is just a step too far, then you can do that. You want to stick with R21 in the walls, okay? Well, then if you really double down on those window U factors, in this case down to 0.24, that would also allow you to hit the target. So with most of these examples, I ended my scenarios with an improved window U factor. And I think while these may be sort of uncommon today in terms of your experience as a builder or a rater, we think these sorts of products are going to become a lot more common in the next few years. And that's because there's a new specification that came out last October for ENERGY STAR residential windows, doors, and skylights. And the reason I think that is a big deal is that back in 2020, the last year that we have market data, 84% of windows sold in the United States, so not just residential new construction, but existing market as well, were ENERGY STAR certified. So the window manufacturers were largely lining up to meet that ENERGY STAR product spec. Now this new spec is much more stringent, but I expect the industry to slowly follow suit and have more and more offerings that meet these new stringent requirements. This is the new product spec as of last October. I'm just gonna call out 2 regions. The yellow region is basically Climate Zone 4. That's where a window with a U factor of 0.25 or better is required for that window to be labeled as ENERGY STAR. And in the northern half of the country, where it's blue, you're required to have a U factor of 0.22 to 0.26, depending on the solar heat gain, in order for that product to be ENERGY STAR labeled. So again, I think the whole industry is slowly gearing up to have more offerings around this. And in fact, we've been talking with our product expert at ENERGY STAR on Windows, and he educated me. He said you can get down to 0.24 and 0.25 U factor with off-the-shelf technologies and a double pane assembly. So we're not asking for a triple pane in the scenarios that I was looking at, though if you're interested in going to triple panes, I think those are going to become even more common and affordable as well. There was a great pre-conference session yesterday between window manufacturers and builders about the need for more high-performance window products. Okay. So let's do a quick knowledge test here. So what's the key difference between National 3.1 and National 3.2? Is it a more stringent ERI target? Is it a more stringent ERI target and a new thermal backstop? Or is it battery storage in every home? A, B, and C, who's going to be the wiseacre? Yeah, pretty compliant crowd. All right, very good. What's the typical range of ERI targets for National 3.2? Is it about 0 to 10 for every house? Is it exactly 50 for every home, or is it about 45 to 55? A, B, C. Very good. I wish I could hand out gold stickers or gold stars or coffee or something for getting that right. And last question. Which homes have to meet a thermal backstop equal to 100% of the 2021 IECC UA? This is a bit of a trickier question. All homes certified to National 3.2, all homes certified to 3.2 if it's permitted, after January 1st of 2025? Or is it all homes, regardless of the version it's certified under, if it's permitted after January of 2025? So A, B, and then C. Okay, correct answer here is B. So if it's being certified to 3.2 and is permitted after January 2025, then this new, more stringent requirement kicks into effect. Okay, so for partners who have been like highly engaged in our program, thank you for your patience. A lot of that might be a recap, and it's worth hearing more than once for sure. But let me take a couple of slides next to tell you like what's right around the corner for ENERGY STAR program as a whole, just to make sure you are up to speed. First off, revision 14. So those familiar with our lingo know that we release basically a revision to our program requirements every year. It's kind of like an annual maintenance release. It helps improve, simplify, and clarify the program. It is almost entirely based on partner feedback. Occasionally, we get tweaked by our partners saying you've changed your requirements 14 times. No one likes change until they actually want to change that helps make their home easier to certify. So I think on the whole, the revision process has been a good way to accommodate all the great feedback we get from you as partners and make the program better. So hopefully you didn't miss this, but over the summer, we actually had a comment period for 5 key proposed changes for revision 14, which we'll finalize later this year. Those 5 changes are pretty significant. So it was to eliminate the mandatory reduced thermal bridging details in our program. It was to streamline our air sealing details and add an infiltration backstop, so a maximum infiltration rate that you have to meet in order for the home to be certified. It's to narrow the scope of builder verified items. It's to transition to track A, HVAC grading, and sunset track B. And it's to sunset the water management system builder requirements. So if you didn't hear about this and you want to learn more, you can watch a webinar at this link when you get the slides. This goes into a lot more detail. Again, we solicited feedback over the summer about these proposals. We're now processing all that feedback we got from partners, and we'll decide whether to proceed with each of these 5 proposals. That will show up in the form of Rev 14 when we release it, aiming for the end of the year. Moving on, National version 3.3. So yes, we are in fact working on the next national version of the program. Why would we do that to ourselves and to you? It's because the 2024 IECC has been finalized and published, and that is more stringent than the 2021 IECC from a casual read. And so we are now working on the next national version of our program. The key goal is to maintain 10% savings or more relative to that latest model code. We are expecting a comment period later this fall on that proposal, and we anticipate that that will be finalized by the end of this calendar year. It's worth noting that the earliest that that could go into effect for certification, like the earliest we require that to be used for certification in a state, would be January of 2027. So a little ways off before you have to even contemplate making use of it. First, we have to finalize it, but that is something that we're actively working on back at headquarters. And finally, for our California partners, we are also working on the next regional version of the program in that state. That's in response to their just finalized 2025 edition of the California State Code. We're expecting, we are actually kicking off a comment period next week on that, again, to maintain 10% savings above the latest code. The good news for our partners, I would say, and our builder partners in particular in California, is that the efficiency features of the California code have more or less leveled off at this point, and the state has turned their attention more to the electrification side of things. So in terms of energy efficiency, we anticipate this new version is going to have roughly the same stringency as the prior version. And again, we're starting a comment period next week, and the earliest possible that that could be required for certification would also be January of 2027. Okay. So that was a real quick thing on upcoming developments. Any questions about that? I don't see any hands. That doesn't mean there aren't any up, but okay. Shout out if you have a question. All right. So that is the content for ENERGY STAR single family new homes, our kind of core program. Now I want to turn my attention to what Aaron mentioned in his introductory remarks, which is ENERGY STAR NextGen. This is what was laying the foundation, we think, for the future of residential new construction. We're pretty excited about it, as is Aaron, which is great. So I want to wrap up with a basic introduction to this relatively new program. So let me start with a little bit of context. As you probably know, what is underlying all of the ENERGY STAR program is our goal to reduce greenhouse gases. And if you talk to experts about how to continue to make progress on those goals, for example, the Department of State's long-term strategy for greenhouse gas reductions, really comes down to 3 strategies in terms of making most of the impact in terms of where we need to go. Energy efficiency, clean energy, and electrification. And with ENERGY STAR, obviously, historically speaking, we focused on that first one, energy efficiency. With ENERGY STAR NextGen, for the first time, we're introducing elements of electrification into the program to continue to advance our environmental goals. And the reason that electrification is so important is because electricity is getting cleaner every year. So renewable energy generation has just about doubled in the last dozen years. And the Energy Information Administration expects renewable energy to increase 5-fold in the next few decades. So as a result of that, you can see that electricity has already started to become much more efficient, and it's being largely driven by changes in policy at the local, state, and federal level. So for just as an example, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed between 2022 and 2023, caused this difference in projections in the annual energy outlook produced by the Energy Information Administration. It dropped the projected emissions rate of electricity by nearly 50% from that change in policy alone. So again, there are lots of policies that are driving this electricity to be cleaner and cleaner going forward. Okay, so for ENERGY STAR NextGen, the NextGen program builds on the successful foundation that ENERGY STAR created, our core program. It helps define the key elements and technologies needed in new homes and apartments to drive emissions down significantly, all in a national platform. We believe that we have a really important role to play in that process as ENERGY STAR to help everyone to do it in an effective, meaningful way and continue to deliver the benefits that consumers have expected from our program all along. So not just energy efficiency, but also comfort, durability, and indoor air quality. Now, this is a forward-looking specification. We understand that not all of our partners are going to be interested or ready to take on ENERGY STAR NextGen from day one. That is perfectly acceptable. We think it's nonetheless very important that NextGen helps point towards the future so that both builders and raters and policymakers are all pointed in the same direction. Now, our new certification program is not intended to replace what we call our core ENERGY STAR program, single-family new homes, nor is it intended to replace DOE Zero Energy Ready homes. It is a supplement and a complement to those existing programs, and it's a new opportunity for recognition for builders like Aaron and Thrive and a handful of other leading builders who are ready to take the next step. Okay, so what do we actually require in ENERGY STAR NextGen? Let's go into a little bit of detail. There are 5 key elements to the program. We start with highly efficient construction, as defined by our core ENERGY STAR program, and to that, we add a set of 4 achievable, advanced, and market-ready innovations. Those include connected, high-efficiency space heating through a heat pump water heating that's also connected, electric cooking, and EV charging infrastructure. Okay? So each requirement can be verified by the same rater going into these homes to inspect them for ENERGY STAR or Zero Energy Ready certification using a new one-page, one-sided checklist. That's really important. And you'll see that as we go through each of these 5 technologies in more detail, that our goal is to bring innovative electric technologies to these key end uses. So we're really defining what is going into these homes, not what we're prohibiting from these homes. It's a really important positioning of the program. And just like our core program, sponsors can always add on additional layers that meet their needs. What we think NextGen represents is kind of the basic set of features that's nationally applicable to drive down emissions in these areas. So let's talk about this in more detail. That first requirement is to certify the home to the most stringent version of our core ENERGY STAR program. So that means national version 3.2 everywhere outside of California, and then California version 3.4 if you're certifying NextGen in that state. So that high efficiency is really important in enabling these other technologies that come after. So what are those technologies? The first is a connected ENERGY STAR certified heat pump. It has to be variable or it has to be 2-speed or variable speed. And it has to be properly sized and installed for each to accommodate the full heating load of the home. Now, multi-stage and variable speed technology is a really important amenity. So it's not just unlocking higher efficiency, but it's also offering things like more consistent temperatures throughout the home. And these systems typically operate more quietly. And as someone who lives in a house where the return is right next to my head in the living room, I can tell you that that quietness is something you can definitely market to homeowners. So we think that's pretty great. There are a couple other components that go along with this heat pump. So the first is that if you're installing this in a climate zone 5 through 8, in a home in climate zone 5 through 8, then that heat pump also has to meet EPA's cold climate criteria. And that basically ensures that the heat pump is going to deliver the sufficient amount of heating and at an efficiency that you'd expect at very low outdoor temperatures typical of those climate zones. Now, you may not know this if you haven't been following heat pump technology, but heat pumps have been installed in cold climates in the US for at least the last decade, if not longer. We actually pulled out some quotes here from Efficiency Maine. They were asking for customer testimonials from actually a retrofit project where they were putting heat pumps into homes in Maine that were existing homes, and the customers, lo and behold, they actually had a really great experience with them. They maintained their comfort, they lowered their utility bills even during a brutal cold snap in the middle of winter. So this technology works, it's being used today, and it can be used in ENERGY STAR NextGen, we think, quite successfully. You don't have to entirely take our word for it, though. That's because we allow dual fuel systems in ENERGY STAR NextGen. So the primary heating system and cooling system has to be a heat pump, but you are allowed to put gas furnace backup or other non-electric backup in and still certify the house. The next component that goes along with this, the air source heat pump requirement, is that they have to meet EPA's connected criteria, or they have to be controlled by a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat, like an ENERGY STAR smart thermostat. For a 2-stage heat pump, that is a great option, the ENERGY STAR smart thermostat. For a variable speed heat pump, you often need to pair that with OEM or manufacturer specific controller to enable all the functionality of that sophisticated equipment. So that might be a case where you default to just a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat to satisfy this requirement. And the web presentation would be complete without mentioning HVAC rating. That's the fourth component of air source heat pumps, is that you have to properly install these systems, meaning grade 1 HVAC rating per ANSI ResNet ACA ICC 310, the HVAC rating standard. If you're not aware of that standard, I'm surprised, but it is something I've been talking about ad nauseum for the last 5 years or more. It's 5 tasks completed in sequence, a design review and a total duct leakage test, which basically our partners are doing today anyways, and then 3 relatively new field tasks, measuring the total airflow through the HVAC system, the blower fan watt draw, and assessing the refrigerant charge. Just doing those 5 tasks gives you a wealth of information about how the system has been installed and makes sure that you're reducing your risk to the builder and that they're really getting what they paid for. So this is a really important component of NextGen. We like to say that ENERGY STAR NextGen homes and apartments allow you to take control of your comfort with a quiet and responsive heating and cooling system. So we think this is a really marketable feature for homeowners. And we think it's catching on. So this is pretty fascinating. In 2022, for the first time, the sales of heat pumps outpaced the sales of gas furnaces in the US. That only accelerated in 2023. I was looking at the numbers before the conference, and that's continuing into 2024 as well. So we think that's a really compelling value message. Okay, on to the next requirement, an ENERGY STAR certified heat pump water heater that meets EPA's connected criteria. Heat pump water heaters, if you haven't heard, they can be up to 4 times efficient as standard electric technology. They can save homeowners hundreds of dollars per year, and heat pump water heaters are really amazing technology to reduce one of the biggest end uses in a home. Now, the small and mighty ENERGY STAR team back at home has installed 3 or 4 of these in our own houses. We've had great luck. They produce enough hot water. They're quiet. They have not had any problems. You know, the biggest change is they produce a little bit of cool air around the heat pump, and that's really not a big deal. So a couple of things we pair with that. Each heat pump water heater has to be relatively quiet. It has to have a sound rating of 55 decibels or less if it's going to be installed in occupiable space, so you don't annoy the homeowner. Pretty straightforward, and more of these products are meeting this and exceeding this requirement. They're becoming quieter every year. And then we require that each heat pump water heater be properly sized so that most of the energy going into the heating water is coming from the efficient compressor and not from the less efficient electric resistance backup system. So that sizing is based on the number of bedrooms in the home. The table is shown here, and we think that's a really sensible requirement. Now, of all the requirements in ENERGY STAR NextGen, probably the heat pump water heater is the one that will take the most work to plan for. And that's because you have to find a space in the home that has enough air surrounding it to extract heat from. And so one thing we've been starting to advise our partners, even if you have no interest in NextGen, start thinking about this when you are working on an update to your plans. Figure out where in the future you'd like to be dropping in a heat pump water heater so you can design around that today. Even if you don't install the heat pump water heater for 5 more years, when the time comes to install that, you want to know where you're going to put it in. And you only have so many opportunities to make those major architectural changes to your plans. So plan ahead. We actually have a technical guide that's available at this link to help people prepare to design and install heat pump water heaters. That's a new resource for our partners, and I encourage you to download that. Okay, on to the 4th category, so 4 out of 5. It's electric cooking. Now currently, so that means an electric cooktop and an electric oven. Right now, we recommend but don't require that technology be induction. Induction offers all sorts of great consumer amenities. It boils water in half the time of gas. Its surfaces are cooler to the touch. That reduces burn risks. It makes it easier to clean up. It's a flat surface that gives you more workspace in the kitchen. There are tons of features to sell to consumers around induction, and that's why there's been a huge increase in the investment of induction cooktops and the availability of induction cooktops, just not enough yet where we'd like it to be. And that's why it's an option instead of a requirement to use the induction side of it. But we think that is going to come in the future. We've already seen prices drop at the low end by a couple $100s just in the last few years for induction cooktops, and the market is rapidly growing here. So if you include induction, there's lots that you can market to for the consumer. The other thing that we're tracking is that for the first time last year, our products team created an ENERGY STAR specification for electric cooktops. So that includes ENERGY STAR induction cooktops and ENERGY STAR electric, plain old electric cooktops. So we're tracking the uptake of that particular product to see how many products are certified, and the ENERGY STAR product designation might become part of NextGen in the future. All right, let's move on to the 5th and final requirement, which is EV charging infrastructure. 3 in 10 Americans say that the next car that they purchase is very likely or somewhat likely to be an electric vehicle. One of the reasons that's not even higher is that people are wondering where they're going to charge that. Is it going to be out in public with a high power charger, or is it going to be at home charging overnight? And so, in addition to that, of EV owners, 95% of those owners say they would like to have the option to charge at home. So this is becoming a feature that's increasingly recognized as valuable, a value add in Zillow listings and everything else. And by installing it at the time of construction, you can cut the cost by something like 75% as opposed to trying to retrofit it into an existing home. And that's why we're including EV charging infrastructure requirements in NextGen. We really want to help enable that transition. So for 1 and 2 family dwellings, So a single family home or a duplex with dedicated parking spots, the requirement is that you have to have one EV-ready parking spot per dwelling. What do we mean by EV-ready? It's a 208, 240 volt charged receptacle in the garage or within 3 feet of the parking space. And it has to be connected to a 40 amp circuit that is energized and is tagged as being for EV charging purposes. So basically you have a big plug in the garage ready to go. If the homeowner buys an EV, they can just plug it in and start charging at level 2. Now, for multifamily buildings, obviously it's a little bit more complex, or if you have a single family development where you don't have dedicated parking spots right next to the home, you maybe have like a surface lot where you have a collection of parking spots for the owners. That's where the other requirements come in. The first requirement, you could do EV ready, so one EV ready spot per dwelling, just like we were talking about. Alternatively, you have to put in an ENERGY STAR certified EV charger for 10% of the spaces, up to 5 total. And then an additional 20% of spaces have to be EV capable. And that basically means that you have conduit running to those parking spots to help facilitate the future installation of EV charging infrastructure at a much lower cost. So very low cost thing you can do up front to save tons of money later. And we like to say that for the consumer, if they have this powered receptacle, heavy duty, wired and ready to charge an electric vehicle in their garage, that's a real selling feature should they choose to purchase an EV in the future. Okay, so if you find that at all compelling, and I hope some of you do, then let's talk about how to get started as a rater. First, if you haven't started doing HVAC grading yet, then you have to go through your mandatory training to make you eligible to do HVAC grading. You should check that box for lots of reasons, including NextGen. Second, we have optional ENERGY STAR NextGen training that we encourage you to take. Gord Cook had an awesome pre-conference session yesterday training people on ENERGY STAR NextGen that was highly attended, very well received. So we encourage you to get more exposed to these requirements and generally become an expert on next-gen technologies. Those categories that we just talked about, your builders are going to need input and advice on how to do that properly. So we encourage you to get more educated on these topics. Now, money always helps as well. So we're quite pleased to say that we have a number of utility sponsors specifically paying out money for next-gen certified homes today in Colorado, in Maryland, in Massachusetts, in Minnesota, in Utah, Virginia, and Washington. So if you're in those markets and you have just an inkling that you want to do next-gen, look for the incentives around that because they can be quite generous as a jumpstart for next-gen certification. If you're not in one of those locations, then another avenue to take is consider the overlap with Zero Energy Ready homes. If you can piggyback NextGen on top of Zero Energy Ready homes, then that would unlock the $5,000 tax incentive to help cover some of the costs. And if you're going to do an ENERGY STAR NextGen anyways, then you're satisfying some of those requirements. For example, Zero Energy Ready homes requires ENERGY STAR version 3.2 as a prerequisite, just like NextGen does. Zero Energy Ready homes has requirements for for electric ready or electric end uses for heat pump, space heating, and water heating. So they have more flexibility than NextGen, but by doing NextGen, you're satisfying those requirements. They have EV charging requirements, just like NextGen, that are very closely aligned. So really the one area that they don't cover right now is the electric cooking requirement. So doing NextGen helps check all those boxes. And finally, I just want to do a quick shout out to some of our early adopters around the country, Beazer Homes, Greensmith Builders, New Tradition Homes in Washington, Quantum Equities in LLC, and Thrive Home Builders, certainly last but not least, have all started to certify homes to the NextGen program. We could not be prouder of their accomplishments, and we really look forward to coming back a year from now and showing you how much that list has expanded. Okay, so that is what I have for you today. I know that was kind of jam-packed. Thanks for your patience. I definitely will take any questions that you have if you would like to ask those now. Or you can come up to me afterwards. I'll hang out here if you're too shy to ask a question. And if you're raising your hand right now, I can't see you, just shout it out if you do have a question. All right, cool, everyone. All right, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
They all hers is falling behind. Nothing in this world could ever bring them down. Yeah, they're invincible, and she's just in the background. And she says, I wish that I could be like the cool kids, 'cause all the cool kids, they seem to fit in. I wish that I could be like the cool kids, like the cool kids. He says I'm talking with a big smile, but they haven't got a clue. Yeah, they're living the good life, can't see what he is going through. They're driving